Okay, John, we are going to jump in. So you work as a menswear designer. Just start with a bit of background of how you got into that field and why menswear.
Yeah. So I do. I work right now. I'm the men's designer at McLaughlin. I actually recently stepped up in role, so I'm heading the men's design over there, hoping to hire some new folks because it's a lot at the moment. But for those who don't know, it's like very classic American preppy clothing, and that's sort of the world that I've lived in for the most part. I got into menswear because my mom in particular is a real preppy dresser. And really leans into that sort of like very menswear tailored Ralph Lauren aesthetic.
Mhm.
Um, when I was younger, though, I didn't necessarily know that fashion was the direction I wanted to go in. I think I always had like a very design-oriented personality. I liked, crafts of various kinds. I was into woodworking. I was, sort of like stringing lacrosse sticks and building things. And it wasn't until really college, but I guess in high school I got into clothing. I started sewing, and then in college I sort of started mixing in the online menswear community. And I went to school for philosophy, so something totally different. And when I graduated, I mean, obviously that doesn't really set you up for any career in particular. I thought about grad school going in a couple different directions, but I was like, you know what? If I'm going to give this menswear thing a shot, I might as well do it now. And then so I moved to the city. I got a job doing retail on Madison Avenue, and from there I just sort of worked my connections and worked on my skill set behind the scenes. I have an industrial sewing machine. I've had that in my apartment pretty much since I moved, and I've I had a very rudimentary skill set in like Illustrator, and I've
Mhm.
just sort of practiced, and it sort of failed upward along the way. So
Yeah,
here I
as
am.
as one does.
Yeah.
I guess I'm curious why design though, because there's so many facets of
Mm.
fashion. I'm curious, like, what the impetus was for design specifically, rather than like, and perhaps I'm
Yeah.
speaking from a selfish perspective because I was always really interested in style as a kid, but
Mm.
my trajectory always took me to like editorial, like that's where my focus was. So I'm just curious why design for you and not any other field in fashion.
I mean, to be very earnest on, sort of at risk of sounding corny, I really think I was put on this earth to create. I've always been a creator. There's just nothing that brings me more joy and fulfillment than sort of seeing my ideas in reality.
Mhm.
And there were other, I in the beginning, I was like, I don't know if design is going to be what I end up liking. I don't know if that's going to be something I'm even able to get into, given that I had no, educational background in it. And so I did some things here and there in like visual merchandising. I did some styling, and then I obviously worked in the retail world. And I realized through all that, I was like, oh man, I have to design. I just have to. I
Mhm.
have to make things. And even more like as I sort of come into myself in my career and spend more time around people that also do this, even more I'm like, oh my god, I've got a million things in my mind and I need to make all of them. And so I really like, I feel blessed every day to get to do what I do professionally, because it does feel like a calling. Like making things for me is, there is no greater pleasure in life. So
Yeah. And it's
yeah.
not work anymore, right? Because you enjoy it.
I mean, it's work in the sense that there are a lot of, yeah, exactly. I know. I should be very careful, because if anybody I work with listens to this, they're gonna be like, "Oh, fine, we can work him to the bone. We don't have to pay him. It's a passion." Um, I do love it. I love it so much. But obviously there are other things I love. I'm out here skiing. This is something, before I got into fashion, I was a competitive freestyle skier. I still love this so much. I don't get to do it very much. And then I have friends and I have other commitments that I unfortunately have to skip out on a lot because of work. But it is amazing. I'm very lucky to do what I do.
The reason I asked you to come on here and chat with me a bit was because we are entering spring. There, I think more now than ever, a lot of young men talking about personal identity and style.
Mm.
And you are part of a cohort of kind of a few, especially in New York, young men who are exploring their own sense of identity and what that means with style. And you look good doing it. So I'm curious, like, part of my question is asking, like, what is the misconception that a lot of men have about style and personal style? And asking that, I also want you to talk about your own sense of style, of like how you put a look together and how other men can kind of take that advice and translate it into their own life.
Yeah. I think I think the biggest misconception, honestly, is that, having a sort of more developed sense of style and putting more effort into it is something that the average guy can't fit into their life. I think a lot of times when somebody that isn't currently invested in the fashion world does comment positively on my style or friends of mine's style, they'll say something to the effect of like, "I wish I had opportunities to wear things like that." And obviously being around people that are also interested in this thing makes it feel a lot more comfortable to sort of step outside of the box and experiment with your own personal style. But you are pretty much always going to be received positively for making an effort when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
your appearance, especially in this day and age. I mean, growing up, I'm 27, and like when I was a kid, when I was in middle school, like I did get shit on a lot for, pardon my language, for wearing what I wanted to, and I really didn't get into fashion to a really significant degree until my early 20s, honestly, because there was a lot of stigma against it. And I think now
Mm-hmm.
that has sort of dropped away. But also, like, if you are living in a major city, if even if you're at like a college with enough people, you nowadays are going to get positive reception.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's big. I also think too, sort of on that front, there is this notion that dressing well, it requires a lot of effort. Um, and I think sourcing a decent wardrobe does take some effort and or money. But after that, getting dressed in the morning, once you have like a really core sense of style and a personal uniform of some sort, like it's actually pretty easy. It makes that decision, pretty easy. And your stress level going out and worrying about how you're going to look, if you're going on a date, or you're going to an event, it's a lot lower because
Mm-hmm.
you're more confident in who you are and how you present yourself. So.
No, 100%. I mean, it's kind of the idea of Steve Jobs where we talk about like the one outfit that he has and he
Mhm.
looks good in it because a lot of his focus was on other things, but it's to that same effect of once you have a core understanding of like what you look good in and why you think you look good in it, kind of building a wardrobe around that is much easier. I'm curious for you, like what are those staples? Like what
Yeah.
is it that you're building a foundation on?
I mean, it's funny. So right now, I mentioned you before we started recording. I'm on vacation with my family, and I love packing for trips because it really does force you to really look at yourself in the mirror and be like, what am I actually going to wear? I have a very
Mm-hmm.
limited, space constraint here. I can only bring so many things, and it's funny. As I packed all my things, I decided I was only literally going to bring blue. Like I don't have any other color than blue. So there are some things like that. I think if you look at my Instagram or whatever, you can see I do experiment here and there, but at the end of the day, I'm a pretty limited when it comes to color palette. I do like blue a lot. I like black a lot. But more importantly than that, I am a silhouette person. I think for me, the outfit starts at the silhouette. Part of the reason I got into menswear as sort of intensely as I did is I had a relatively difficult body to fit. I've always been a relatively athletic person. I also just have like certain genetic quirks that made my frame kind of hard to dress. And so I started off thrifting things and doing alterations on them to make them fit me. And so I always start with like a fit first perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I can get into more detail there as to like what I personally look for and like, but yeah, that's very important to me. And also I'll say too, and you've mentioned this, you are talking to a lot of people that are in the menswear sphere. I definitely come at things from a menswear angle first. So I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate very much like a sort of more avant-garde, high fashion approach to this thing, but I come at things through like the sort of old Hollywood, tailored clothing, mixed in sportswear, Ralph Lauren, that sort of world. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I actually want to circle back to your note about like trying to fit your body type. If you
Mm,
could dive in, because something that I, especially like during my Rolling Stone days, I used to get emails all the time of men asking, like, I have this type of body, I don't know how to fit it, I don't know what looks good. And it's never that it's like just that they might be overweight and don't know how to dress for an overweight body, or maybe they're too
mm,
short, or it's kind of like men have along the way lost the sense uh, of just like knowing what looks good and kind of like fitting it to their body type. We'll get into more of this after this question, but dive into like where you saw your struggles and like how you
yeah.
accommodated for them.
Yeah, so I mean to get very technical with it, and I should say too, when I worked retail, I worked alongside a master tailor. We had three tailors in house, which was very unusual and very cool. And I learned like really the intricacies of fit and how to fit garments and how to alter patterns for that. For me, starting at the top, I have very broad shoulders, but a very narrow chest. So
Mm-hmm.
what fits my shoulders often is huge on my chest. I also have a very prominent back relative to my chest. From there, I have a relatively small waist for my upper body, and then I have a very large seat for my waist. So fitting jackets is a nightmare, and fitting pants is a nightmare. Also, I have relatively small thighs relative to my seat. So all those things. I also have a little bit of a sway back, so I have a hollow lower back and a very prominent upper back with a little bit
Mm-hmm.
of stoop, so I have a little bit of hunch in the top. Um, and I think also it's like there are a lot of guys that'll be like, I have a normal body, and if you want to get sort of crazy enough, I could diagnose 1,000 problems for them. But there are certain things that guys will be like, I literally every time I put on an off the rack thing, it fits like crap.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely have that experience at a lot of brands. And so for me, that actually really framed my understanding of what I wanted clothes to look like. So I was like, if I could imagine clothes and make them from scratch, what would I do to really like, sort of flatter what I have been given? And so I do like a very like I don't know if you know the reference, but if you look at old apparel arts magazines, which are like trade magazines, that menswear shops like haberdasheries would subscribe to, and they had these illustrations in them done by a series of artists. The most famous one is Lawrence Fellows, and his illustrations depict these guys that have these very broad shoulders, very narrow waists, and very long but full legs.
Mm-hmm.
And I, like so many guys in my sort of menswear world, and was sort of raised on this imagery and I'm fascinated by it. And for myself, I'm like, I want to always look like I have incredibly broad shoulders, and then a really close fitting, sort of a torso, and then a very full, broad leg line, and
Mm-hmm.
long leg line. So that for me is like the silhouette. I also should say, and I'm on a ski vacation right now. I grew up as a competitive freestyle skier, and I still ski as much as I can. And alpine skiing gear from the 30s and 40s has always been one of my biggest inspirations. And so,
Mm-hmm.
for anybody that knows, or if you want to know, just look it up on Pinterest. It's a lot of these short, cropped blouson style jackets that have a full shoulder and a full back because you need that range of motion in the upper body, and then these very full and pegged ski pants that were made in like these super heavyweight wools. And so that sort of silhouette definitely falls into my personal proclivity or whatever. So,
I think from maybe like an average perspective, we don't think of men really caring about style in the way that maybe women might care about style, and that women's wear, there's so many more options. So to like
mm,
pick from anything, you really have to pay attention to like what brands and designers are producing what. For men, the options are so much slimmer, so the idea of choice becomes more nuanced. And it's those exact things you're talking about, of like recognizing that, hey, I have broader shoulders, so when I pick out a shirt or a top, it has to have some sort of span that fits that and then caters to the rest of my body. Like those
mhm,
nuances are actually way more detailed. And what I'm finding through doing a lot of this data work is that, oh no, men are really conscious about what they're wearing. It's just that the choices that they have
Yeah.
are just more nuanced, like you're saying.
Yeah, and I mean, first, I have two sort of thoughts there. The first one is menswear historically, and this is like a big split in the design world between men's and women's wear. Menswear has always been very limited when it's come to silhouette and body. There just
Hmm.
aren't that many options. You know, you buy a sport coat for your jacket, you buy a woven shirt with a collar that's either a button down or a spread for your shirt, and then you wear a trouser that has like a very limited, you know, range and rise and range and sort of leg shape. Um, and the all the focus in men's instead is on real technical details and finishing. So, you know, what makes one pant different from another is literally the seaming, or it's the way that it's dyed, or it's the material that it's constructed out of. Whereas women's, yeah, there always has been much more of a focus on sort of emotion and expression and fit and silhouette. And I think men, because of that, therefore don't always have the like intellectual language to even explore these concepts. And yet they have that sort of experience of distress going into a store and being like, yeah, my shoulders are broad, but my waist is narrow. And so I put on something that has broad shoulders and the waist is massive, you know?
Hmm.
And so it looks like I'm like this, you know, I'm David Burns or whatever in the Talking Heads clip, you know? And guys hate that. And I think, you know, to get a little bit topical with it, there obviously is a lot of focus in sort of mainstream culture with this whole looks maxing thing. Young guys really care to like an
Hmm.
extreme degree, probably born of a lot of unhealthy things about how they look. Um, and I think, you know, maybe adjacent to that, there is also a burgeoning interest in menswear. And men's fashion and sort of what that can do in a very practical way, you know? And I obviously, as a creative and as a lover of the craft, hope that there then gets some translation into people just appreciating fashion for an art form and for a sort of means for expression. But it is a tool, you know, the way that you are perceived in the world. Is greatly affected by the way that you dress and the way that you sort of navigate the dating scene and the work scene and the social scene and all that. It is all affected by the way that
Hmm.
you dress. And so um, I'm happy that more guys are invested in it now.
You know, menswear for centuries has kind of looked the same, and that suiting was so prominent in menswear. The last 50 or 60 years that have changed, which is relatively like a short period when you think about the true breadth of menswear history, in that the silhouettes are a lot more relaxed. Athletic wear is relatively new. So all of these things are now getting mixed in, and there is a larger dialogue, like you're saying, of, well, what does that mean for me, and how do I use style to navigate my everyday life? Where do you see menswear going from here?
It is hard to say. I mean, I think what you've said about the sort of introduction of sportswear to the market and the fact that that has really taken over most men's wardrobes is hard to ignore and hard to make a case against. Like I would love to say that like the Lululemon ABC fake chino pant is going to die. Um, but I just kind of don't think it is. That being said, I think post-pandemic, across the industry, we have seen a renewed interest in occasion dressing. So, on a daily basis, I think, unfortunately, things, at least in my opinion, things are going to stay pretty athletic in nature and pretty casual in nature. But on the flip side of that coin, there are a lot of men that really appreciate having nice pieces in their wardrobe that are for like festive occasions, that are for going out. We're even seeing the resurgence of neckties, you know? And
Mhm.
obviously, I think that that does hit a pretty small demographic of people that really care. But, you know, if Jonathan Anderson has got it all over his runways, you know, it does have a trickle down effect. And I think you are seeing more guys sort of casually wear ties or want to wear ties to the dinner party they're going to. Um,
Mhm.
Specifically when it comes to like sort of more um I don't know, like more specific things that are coming in and heading out right now. Tailoring and menswear is in like a very sort of 80s Armani kind of world. So if you look at brands like, I don't know, Todd Snyder or I don't know. It's hard for me to say what exactly brands, but th everything is very full and deconstructed. I do
Hmm.
personally think that we are going to see a return to slim, and the way that we're going to get there, and the way that we already are getting there, is brands like, Husbands Paris that are doing this very sort of slim cut, late 70s, early 80s feeling silhouette. That is going to get us toward that slim aesthetic, and then I think definitely within 5 years we're going to see most people that are cool and up on fashion wearing slim and skinny once again. I will say you reached out, not to go to BTS, but you reached out on the with a comment about the wide silhouette of pants I wear, and I'm getting
Mm-hmm.
to the point now where there are several days where, a week where I'll put on wide pants and I'm like, I don't know if I can wear these anymore because I
Oh
think
no.
we are headed away from this imminently.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, you perhaps you are unlike most men in America and perhaps also around the world in that you work in fashion, so
Mhm.
your sense of trend is way
Way
farther
ahead.
ahead than most.
Yes.
I think a lot of men are probably just now starting to
Mm.
get into wide leg. I would
Yeah.
maybe retract that statement with young men. I think young men have been wearing wide leg pants for a really
Mhm.
long time, and I think exactly what you're saying is probably true with them. But the average, I mean, I spend so much time, part of my job is like listening to voter testimonials and understanding why they vote and like why they make decisions. And the reality is that there's actually a lot more people out of touch with what's
Mhm.
happening in the world than you would
Sure.
assume.
Absolutely.
uh Same thing happens in style,
Mhm.
so I do think wide leg pants will stay around for a bit, but it's
Oh,
interesting
they'll
to
be
hear
here
that
for
you're
at
saying
least a
it's,
decade.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
But
yeah,
it's good to hear you think that they're gonna slim out soon.
absolutely. I mean, I have to sort of remind myself of this and sort of caveat it on a regular basis when it comes to fashion, but also things like politics. Like, I live in New York City and I work in this industry. And so, of course, my even just like the sort of fatigue that I have with seeing these styles is just on a totally different level than the average American or person in the world that is only sort of like engaging with fashion on a need basis.
Hmm.
That being said, it's like it is my job, to sort of look ahead. And it's funny, Sam and I, Sam Parvin, who sort of connected us here, he he loves the fact that I do these effectively quarterly in and out lists, and he's done some reviews of them in his content. But I just sort of, as like a personal exercise, I will do in and out lists pretty much
Hmm.
once a quarter, if not more often than that. And it is very much like very much on the cutting edge. So out, has, big, huge, wide leg pants have been out now for a little while. So.
Yeah. What else is on that in and out list? I'm curious.
Oh man, I mean it is very long. If you want, I can pull it out actually and just read it for you.
Yeah.
If you,
Yeah, you don't
yeah,
have
if
to
you're
read
cut.
through all of them, but
Yeah,
just
yeah,
like
no, I'll just read a
your
couple of the
keys.
ones that I feel like are the most important and have the sort of biggest knock-on effect. I think the biggest thing, I've had this for a while. I think all sort of cowboy and western wear stuff is just super out. I don't want to
Mm.
see that anymore. I don't want to see turquoise and silver jewelry. I don't want to see cowboy boots. I don't want to see cowboy hats. I'm so over it. In general, really creative styling, I think, is something that's in men's and women's wear and is going to
Mhm.
have a very sort of a long knock-on effect. So what I mean by that, woven shirts layered one over the other, sweaters over the shoulders, even maybe multiple sweaters, belts that are layered over jackets. So getting really creative with the way that we're wearing things in our wardrobe. Look to like Celine right now. They're very good. Michael Ryder's doing
Mhm.
a great job of that. Um, but obviously, we're really getting back to sort of more like formal military dress. So we'll see a lot of side stripes on trousers. See Napoleon jackets. There's been a lot of talk of that. We'll see epaulets again. We'll see gold buttons. The M65 jacket, which is a very classic military surplus jacket in that sort of olive drab color, that's making a resurgence. And part of that is the stand collar in general is making a huge resurgence.
Mhm.
That's because of Phoebe Philo and a lot of the great work she's been doing. Um, I'll give you some more fun out. Sneakers are totally out. They
Yeah.
have been out for, probably a couple years at this point. We are firmly in leather shoe territory at the moment.
Mhm.
So a lot of loafers, some lace ups, but sneakers are just, they are not in. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to see if there's anything else that sort of has enough sort of mainstream appeal that it's worth mentioning. But yeah, I love doing this thing. I think it's very fun, you know.
Yes. I mean,
So
I wanna circle back on your note on military and military
yeah,
aesthetic
sure.
because I have a piece coming out. I'm waiting for the photographer to send me back the photos. I have a piece coming out because I had made a comment last year in July where
Mm,
I started watching these politicians that were coming to rise, and they all had some like loose thread of authoritarian wear or like some sort of military aesthetic. A lot of them came from the military source, so it made sense. But I specifically noted Senator Slotkin, who is the junior Democratic senator in Michigan, and then Rob DeSantis, who is the Republican governor. Is he governor in Florida?
Florida. Yeah.
So this is where like the cultured swine world kicks in. It's
Mhm.
like I don't think people understand that when small nuances like that happen over here, like you start seeing trends coming down the runway. If it starts creeping in other places like politics, there's a huge amount of influence. So Slotkin now is no longer just a Democratic senator. She is now a person of influence because her influence is now no longer just her policy, it's her visual appeal.
Mm,
So hearing you say that there is a return to military, I'm like, oh
mm.
fuck, like there's gonna be a lot of politicians that we're gonna start seeing really embrace that style, especially now, like we just I don't know if it's official, but we have bombed Iran.
Um, Yeah, so I mean, first of all, I have to say, and sorry to plug something else on your podcast, but you probably heard of it. Avery Trufelman has a podcast called Articles of Interest, and
Yes,
she did
yes.
just recently. She did the podcast on this series on gear,
Mm-hmm.
and that really it leans very heavily into the world of militaria and military surplus and how that's influenced mainstream fashion. And I should say. In menswear, what we tend to say is that all of it, every single style in menswear, really either comes from military or sportswear.
Mm-hmm.
All the styles you see on a regular basis, down to like a tailored jacket or a field jacket or a bomber jacket. I mean, it's in the names. These are all things that came from very, very utilitarian backgrounds, and typically it was military and or workwear, but workwear was often military workwear. So there always is a connection there. That being said, there are these moments where we do get very, very on the nose with it. And we
Mm-hmm.
get very, we use the fact that these are references as symbols and as sort of language for whatever sort of political message we're looking to sort of project at the time. Um, right now, where that sort of goes and how that manifests, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I can speak to the actual garments that I think we're going to see and the actual references we're going to see, but how that sort of weaves into this broader political narrative, I don't necessarily know. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I I think right now, at least in the United States, there is a general reticence to wearing things that feel too military, especially amongst fashion concerned people who tend to be more left wing and or just more anti-Trump. Um, so if I were to guess, I think there will be probably a very intentional way in which people are wearing these, where they are projecting the fact that they are not wearing them in support of our current regime and its military efforts around the globe. Um,
Right.
but how that sort of looks, I don't know. I don't really
Yeah.
know. Not
Yeah.
yet.
I mean, yes, time will tell. Time will tell.
Mm,
Um, to somewhat jump off of this, but perhaps it's still like somewhat in there. You made a note a while ago about men finding more key pieces that they're willing to invest in. I'm
mm.
curious what you're investing in and what you think men should be investing in going forward.
Are we talking spring or just in general?
Could be in general. Perhaps spring is more relevant
Mm,
for the shopper now, but let's just say in general, because I will say something else I'm finding out through this poll, which you kind of already know, but it's better like when you actually have the data to support it. Men are much harder to buy into trends. They
Sure.
are kind of like the slow burner. Maybe in 5 years, if you keep hammering them on the same idea, then they'll buy into it. But more often than not, they already have a sense of who they are or what they aspire to be. And it's like you're not really feeding them in on trends. So perhaps this question is better suited of just like in general, what should men be investing their time and money into?
It's very hard. And I find myself saying this more and more often in life. I am not your average consumer. So, what I want and what I'm sort of investing in is going to be very different. Also, on top of that, being a designer and having the ability to have factories sample things for me, and then also being a tailor and sewist on the side, and the fact
Mm-hmm.
that I can make my own clothing really changes things. What I will say though, what I have been making a lot of myself and doing a lot at work is casual contemporary suiting.
Mm-hmm.
I think tailoring does have a relevance now, and a growing relevance. You know, wearing a tailored jacket with matching trousers is something that guys seem to be wanting to do more, and is something that has always had, sort of cultural value and capital attached to it. In this world, that looks very different than what it used to look like. There is way less structure. The textiles are way more casual. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and in general, it all feels a lot more like sportswear than it does like true classic stiff tailoring. Um, and I think that is a world that's very approachable for a lot of guys, and is something that's going to really like make them feel very good about themselves in a way that sort of just buying a pair of chinos, despite being actually very similar in nature, it's not going to give them that sort of same feeling. So like I'd say like buy that sort of like tailored cotton linen suit that has the
Mm-hmm.
patch pockets, that is sort of more deconstructed. Personally, in my opinion, I would go with something that has like a little bit more of an expressive shape that just sort of gets into my own personal point of view. And right now, what I've been making a lot of, and it's actually, I just wore it the other night. It was sort of on my socials. I was wearing this denim, full denim suit that the jacket has these huge shoulders with a lot of roping, these big clover lapels, and super full wide leg pants. Um, and that is very much sort of in line with my own personal aesthetic and what I like, sort of shape wise. But there's a lot in the market right now that sort of
Mm-hmm.
hits that same niche in the wardrobe. You know, it's something that you can wear with a t-shirt in the summer. It's something that you could layer with like a sweatshirt in the winter, and you could wear boots with it. You can wear sneakers. You can wear loafers. And I think that's like gonna be a really great place for a lot of guys to put some of their money. That's something they'll get wear out of for the next 5, 10 years. They'll be able to break it up, wear it as a sport coat, wear it as pants. I think that's a really easy answer for me.
Mm-hmm. Can you go into a bit fabrication? Because you kind of mentioned there
Mhm.
of like cotton blends, and that's
Sure.
just something I don't know if a lot of men outside of like like truly interested in style, tailoring, fashion know about. So I just think it's a great conversation to have for just the general man.
Yeah, yeah, I love getting nerdy. I mean, I'm a mega nerd, and this is obviously my job. I love talking people's ear off about this, so totally. There are sort of three different directions we can go here. The first one is the 365 option. So something that you can really wear all year round, without it looking or feeling out of place. There, I would go with cottons and or cotton wool blends. You can also do 100% wool, although that tends to get a little more tailored. The most tailored I would go here is what we'd call like a high twist fresco. So that is going to be in 100% wool cloth most of the time, and the actual yarns themselves are, they've been twisted up like under high tension, like when you're wringing out a rag. And what it does is it actually makes the surface quality of the yarn very dry and crisp. And so when they're woven, they can weave them very loosely, and you still get this very like heavy, dense textile that has a lot of wrinkle resistance. Um, and it has a much more sort of like textured, casual look to it. So that's a really great option for something that's a little more tailored. Going into the cotton world, I would go toward your like twills or drills or satines. And so those are all just going to be like effectively a chino, a classic chino fabric that you'd find often in like a military chino. So that
Hmm.
sateen is something you'd find in like the sort of Korean and Vietnam War era pants, and then the twills and drills you're going to find earlier on in like the field chinos from the from World War II. Those are going to be really cool, really casual suiting fabrics. Also, the way that they take a needle, um, is it creates like a nice puckering on all the seams that makes things feel very casual. Also, a lot of times when you find those in the marketplace, they're going to be garment dyed. Garment dyeing is when you start off, you sew the garment with an undyed textile that's raw, and then they actually dye the whole thing, the whole finished jacket or pant or whatever after the fact, and it creates this high-low effect that again just looks casual. It has the effect of like a worn-in pair of jeans. So
Hmm.
that world is where really I would go. And the last one also denim. I think denim and chambray is a very cool. It verges in Western territory, but depending on the way that it has been cut and sewn, it can totally not go there. But those are great 365 options, all of those. When you're going into your sort of, we'll talk spring summer first. I would say go with a either any blend of the following: cotton, linen, silk, and wool. There are a lot of great mills out of Italy that do blends in those, and they almost feel tweedy in nature. So again, really casual. But it has a really nice texture for the spring and summer, and again, it takes a needle very nicely. It feels very casual. Also, I love like a linen canvas or like a really basket weavy linen or cotton linen blends that again sort of they lean more into that sort of military or workwear feel, but they're just a little more suited to that summer climate. And then getting into the fall winter, I would go with sort of your heavier weight classic tweeds. Again, those feel
Hmm.
very casual when done in the right way. And then I also like things like cavalry twills, which effectively it's like the cotton twill version, but it's for the winter. They're often done in a really chunky wool. They have sometimes sort of color variation in them, so they're like non-solid solids, we'd call them in the industry. And that sort of thing is a very nice fall winter option. So there, I sort of rambled on very quickly, but those are sort of the directions that I would go in that world. I think that gives you just a lot of use case and a lot of wear potential across a lot of scenarios.
No, that's perfect. Now, apart from J. McLaughlin, which we obviously want to suggest for young men to shop,
Totally.
what are other brands that you suggest they look toward that have some of these options that you're suggesting?
Sure. I mean, the first one I have to mention, just because it is the most important brand in this world, is Ralph Lauren. They do a
Hmm.
great job. I know people that work there. They're great people. Um, they have a lot of options and they have a big range in price offering. So you can get it at a pretty approachable level, and then you can obviously go sky high with it. Buck Mason right now is doing a great job, really
Mm-hmm.
doing that classic American sportswear to the T. They are taking those reference images that you'll find on mood boards on Instagram, and they are just remaking that clothing, and they're doing a good job of it. And again, the price point is very approachable for the average guy. Their color palette is also very easy for most
Hmm.
people to fit into the wardrobe really nicely. Personally, I this gets a little bit more tailored, although they have some of the more casual options too. I love the brand P. Johnson. I
Mm.
think they do some really incredible suiting, some really incredible sportswear, and more importantly, the way that they mix it all together to me is is very fresh, and it's something that I think the average guy can relate to. To me, I always joke that that brand is like the way that finance guys should all dress, and kind of in their mind are dressing, because they will mix in these sort of like nylon techie vests with a tailored suit and like a slipper, and it looks amazing, and it's something that you could wear to an office and you wouldn't feel too out of place. Trying to think some other brands. Drake's is incredible, higher price point, definitely more aspirational, but they have been doing a great job for a really long time. I'm trying to think of some other ones. I mean, even brands like J. Crew, Alex Mill, some of these sort of
Hmm.
more entry level price point, they have some awesome pieces. I think the longer I've spent in this world of design and of menswear, the more I've realized that it's like you don't need to be a snob about these things. Like certain brands, because of their scale, they're able to attract one great talent because they have money, but they can also negotiate really great rates and work with great factories and produce really great product. Also on that Uniqlo, I mean, I think a lot of people talk about the
Yep.
fact that they do phenomenal basics.
Hmm.
And they do because they have that sort of Japanese influence. They have a lot of that sort of casual Ivy, like deconstructed suiting. Um, that is really great and a great place to experiment with these things if you're not too concerned about the fast fashion thing, which you probably should be.
Yes.
So
Yes.
so those are a few options.
Well, John, this has been great. Thank you again for joining, and look for the newsletter. It's coming out
Yeah.
tomorrow. I think you'll be kind of surprised at the response. It's catered to men in the DMV. I make no illusions about that,
Mm,
but it's still quite interesting to see how men respond.
cool. Well, Kyle, thank you very much. Yeah, this was really fun.
Amazing. We'll chat again.
Cool.